So welcome everyone to today's training. We have said good morning, but I can see we've got some delegates from Pakistan who said good afternoon. So hello to you wherever you are in the world. So far I can see we've got people from Pakistan, from Nigeria and from Bangkok. So perhaps other people might just like to type in the chat box to everyone so that we know we've all got that working and we're all able to share good practice and things like that. So if you could just pop where you're from in the chat box, that would be great. So today's training is oh, hello from Bedford, Madagascar. We are a worldwide community. It's an international qualification. Ecuador, Ryan from the UK, Italy. Okay, lots. Okay, thank you very much. Lovely to see where everybody's coming from. And Jersey, so we're very international. And the second thing I'm just going to ask you to type in, and then I'll give my general introduction, is whether you're new to this qualification or whether you've been teaching it for a while. That would be great. So, as I said, welcome to this module 1 of two-part training, and the second module being on the 2nd of May. That one is much more interactive, if you like, and much more about assessment. This one is very much more of a welcome, really. So I'm Teresa, I'm your trainer for today. I'm a trainer with Pearson, but also I'm very involved in this specification. I'm senior examiner on paper 1, I'm senior examiner on the coursework. So you're all very welcome. I can see lots of countries coming up here, places that I've done training face-to-face in the past. So we may have met if you've been teaching this for a while. So welcome. Today we're looking predominantly at content and planning and support. As I said, module 2 is very, very much about assessment and using the question papers and the mark schemes and getting into that real nitty-gritty of how it's awarded and how it's marked. But for today, it's much more general. So it's reasonably short, this particular session. So we're looking at Pearson Edexcel as an awarding body, a bit about who we are, what we do, and we're looking at what the qualification entails and a little bit about course planning, and then a little bit about what support is available to you. Particularly as I'm seeing, we've got lots of people who are new to the 4ET English literature. So we're going to look at how the qualification is devised and awarded. We're going to look at the content of the qualification. We're going to do a little bit around planning, how you might want to plan the course. If you're new to us, I can see a lot of you are. And a little bit about the resources and lessons. There will be the opportunity, obviously we've got the chat, we're all good on that. Thank you very much for popping your names and how long you've been teaching in there, how long you've been teaching this qualification, that is, because that means we can share some good practice as we go through. So welcome to Pearson. Some of you may have known us back in the day as Edexcel. So we call ourselves Pearson now. What happened was we were Pearson Edexcel. Edexcel was the awarding body, the assessment arm of the organisation, and Pearson was the publishing wing of the organisation. And they came together to make Pearson Edexcel. And now we've got this umbrella term of Pearson. So a little bit about who we are. We are the world's leading learning company, the UK's largest awarding organisation. A heritage that goes back internationally 150 years, which is quite something. I always find the stats here really quite interesting. I am an English teacher, but I'm not really a statistician, but I do think they're interesting. So schools, universities and employers globally recognised qualifications to over 3.5 million students a year. That's a lot. We work with 6,500 schools, colleges and employers. We mark over 10 million exam scripts, and we operate in 70 countries. We've got quite a lot of them. I don't know, probably about 12 perhaps, different countries that came scrolling up as I asked you to share where you were joining us from. So that's just a little bit about the organisation. So moving on to thinking about the specification, the 4ET IGCSE. So there are two routes through this qualification. You can either choose the exam route, which is paper 1 and paper 2. Paper 1 is mandatory for all students. So you can choose paper 1, the exam, and paper 2, the exam, or you can choose paper 1, the exam, and paper 3, the coursework route. And that's up to your school to decide which of those routes through they want to take. So in the resources tab, we did have SO3 as one of the downloads, and that's the specification. That's SO3. So I'm just going to talk through how this qualification is made up. Excuse me. So the mandatory exam is on poetry and modern prose. And I always think of this paper myself as the 20, 30, 40 paper, because that's how the marks are awarded. So section A is unseen poetry. And it's a 120 mark question. There is no choice there. The poem appears. And students have to explore the meaning of the poem and the effects created in this poem. Section B is anthology poetry. So there is an anthology that supports this qualification. I'll be talking a bit more about that as we go through. But students study the poems in that anthology from part 3. Now, if you're teaching 4EA, one of our 2 English language IGCSE specifications, you'll be familiar with that anthology because parts 1 and 2 of that anthology are for the 4EA qualification, English language, and part 3 is for the 4ET English literature. It's the same anthology, but obviously different texts for the different exams. So students will have studied all of those poems in the GCSE English Anthology Part 3, and they have a choice of 2 questions, and they're question 2 or question 3 on the question paper, and they choose just one of those, and we'll be talking a bit more about that as we go through. And then section 3, section C, is the 40 mark essay question, choice of 2, on the set text that you've studied with them. This is a closed book exam, so they don't take their texts into the exam. They do have a full copy of the anthology poems in a booklet sent to you by Pearson as part of the exam materials. So they don't have anything annotated. They have the anthology poetry for section B in front of them, and for the modern prose, they don't have the text. So that's a 2-hour exam. It's more heavily weighted components of this qualification. It's worth 60% of the final grade, and it's a 2-hour paper. Then if you're taking the exam route, you would be looking at component 2, and the focus here is modern drama and literary heritage. So here we have 2 questions. Section A is on the modern drama text that you've studied with them. It's 130 mark essay question. Students have a choice of 2 questions. And section B is the literary heritage text, the one that you've studied with them in class, 130 mark essay question from a choice of 2 on those set texts. Now, paper 2 is open book, so they can take their prescribed editions of the text into the exam. Obviously, they're not, they're unannotated, and they have to be one of the editions that's published in the specification. Just a reminder, that's SO3 in your download pack for today. And then if you're doing paper 1 and the coursework route, we can see how the coursework mirrors, the component 3 mirrors component 2. So it's 40% of the final grade, 60 marks, which is the same as component 2, and the focus is the same. So assignment A is on modern drama, one essay response to a teacher-devised or teacher and student-devised assignment on the studied text. And assignment B is the literary heritage text, one essay response to a teacher-devised or teacher-student-devised assignment on the studied text. So 2 pieces of coursework, internally set and assessed and externally moderated by your moderator from Pearson. So that's how the qualification looks. This slide just outlines the structure of the course. So we've got some key documents here for you. Just going to sort through these. The specification, as I said, SO3 in that download. Very important document for you. It's the key document you need to read before you start to teach the course. It gives you the content, the assessment, the core objectives of the course. And the SAMs, sample assessment materials, we call them SAMs for short, are also very important documents. We're now on issue 2 of those SAMs, and they're SO4 in your download today. So those are 2 really important documents. The SAMs, the sample assessment materials, are the examples that are written before any students have taken the live exams, giving you an idea of what the questions are going to look like and so on. Now, we've talked a little bit about the anthology, and if you're not aware of the anthology, it's in your download pack today. It's labelled SO5 in your download. I'm just going to give you a little bit of time to make sure you've got your downloads all sorted out. So that anthology, part 3, is in paper 1, that's section B, the 30-mark question, and it's part 3 of the anthology. You order this from Pearson. Students should have a copy to use in the classroom. You need to study all of the poems in that part 3. They need to, students need to feel confident that they know these texts well. We'll look at what the poems are there later on in the training. So we're now going to look at the key bit of content for this qualification, which is obviously the set text. So just a reminder of the 3 sections of where the texts are assessed. Section A, unseen poetry. A selection of modern poetry should be studied in order to prepare for the unseen assessment. And of course, the first time students see the anthology poems, they're unseen. And there are plenty of materials around that will support you in terms of looking at different poems for the unseen. We'll talk a bit more about that later. Then we've got section B, the anthology poetry. So students study the 16 poems that we'll have a look at in a moment from part 3 of the anthology. They answer 1 question on either 2 set poems, 2 named poems that is, or 1 poem named in the exam paper plus 1 of their choice from that anthology. So that's the 30-mark question, unseen 20, 30, and then we move on to modern prose, the 40-mark question. They study 1 text from the set text, which we'll look at in a moment, and they answer 1 question on the text they've chosen. So teachers should focus on the study of whole text. So here we go on the anthology poetry. So in a moment, I'm going to direct you to another of the downloads, but the poems, the 16 poems that students study here are If, Prayer Before Birth, Blessing, Search for My Tongue, 2:30, Piano, Hide and Seek, Sonnet 116, La Belle Dame, Poem 39, War Photographer, The Tiger, My Lost Duchess, Half Caste, Do Not Go Gentle into That Good Night, and Remember. So at this stage, I'd like to direct you to SO6 in your download pack. This is called the Getting Started Guide. This has some excellent summaries of the set text of the poems. It has ideas for teaching, all kinds of things. So I'm just going to give you a moment to download SO6 because we're just going to have a little look at some of the things in there. So if you could download that from your packs, please. I'll give you a second to do that. Okay, so we're going to take the example of piano. That's on page 34 of the Getting Started Guide. Okay, thanks for telling me you've got it. Excellent. And if we have a look at that, we can see we get an overview of the poem. This is page 34 of the Getting Started Guide. And then we've got 4 bullet points that address things like the structure and the form of the poem, some comments on the words, some stuff about illusion, how the poem ends, etc. So we're given, if you have a look, in bold, a man reminisces about an event from his childhood when he hears the woman singing. That first bullet point there talks about the uniformity of the poem, the rhyming couplets, equal number of lines per verse, the syllable count. So it means we don't have to do all the thinking for ourselves. We've got some material to help us. We've got, despite the hints of negativity shown by the words insidious, betrays, weeps, the rhyme and rhythm remain upbeat, reminiscent of the many references to music and its power to uplift. Then we've got something about the narrator's description of his mother in line 4, with some language examples. Then we've got that third bullet point about the allusions to sound echoed throughout the poem. We've got some technical vocab, like onomatopoeic boom of the tingling string. We've got the bit about tinkling in stanza 2. And then we go on to our 4th bullet point, which is about the final stanza, that he can no longer be a man because of the emotions he feels. My manhood is cast down in the flood of remembrance. The fact that he's overwhelmed by these emotions. And the inconsolable I weep. So just really useful introductions to these poems to give you some ideas to start teaching, so you don't have to think of all the ideas yourself. But it is really useful. So I'm just going to give a moment to have a flick through the other anthology poems, just that part of the Getting Started Guide before we move on. So I'll just give you a moment to do that. Hey, George, I'm not too sure if that's because I stopped talking, to give you a moment to look through that getting started guide. It may just be you.
Fantastic.
Okay, so hopefully you've had a little bit of time to look through that. So we're going to move on now to think about section C, the modern prose. Here, students choose from one of the following texts: To Kill a Mockingbird, Of Mice and Men, The Whale Rider, The Joy Luck Club, and Things Fall Apart. Now we have two new texts coming onto this specification. They're added for first teaching from this September, and they will first appear in the exam paper in June 2026. And they are Clara and the Sun and Western Lane. So that's news that's hot off the press, if you like. So we're just going to have a quick look at Of Mice and Men, which is one of our more popular texts, again from the Getting Started guide. So if you could find Of Mice and Men in your Getting Started guide, and you'll be able to see there that we have 9 bullet points on context and content. We've got 4 bullet points on themes, and we've got 2 paragraphs on structure and form. So we're just going to have a little look through that now. So we can see under context and content, it's set in Salinas, California in the 1930s at the time of the Great Depression. The fact that Steinbeck was from California, he was interested in the lives of agricultural workers. He wrote the novel in 1937. A little bit about the Wall Street crash and how that might have impacted on what he was writing about. The fact that there was no welfare state and many ordinary people became homeless and hungry. The fact that George and Lennie are representative of many men who travelled around the country trying to find work. Yeah. The fact the comment on the drought, meaning that the harvest failed. A little bit about poverty, little regular work, men could get canned on the whim of the ranch boss. And the context of racial prejudice against Black people through the character of Crooks. Of course, we've got many outsiders, haven't we, in this text? We've got Crooks, we've got Curly's wife, we've got Candy, we've got Lennie, you know, all in a way outsiders. Then under themes, we've got dreams, obviously the American dream being a key theme there. Sorry, yes, pages 8 to 9, apologies. We've got loneliness, we've got death, we've got friendship. And then under structure and form, we've got the fact that the action takes place from Thursday to Sunday. We've got the circular narrative ending and beginning, where it's, you know, at the clearing by the river. Of course, we've got those key changes, haven't we? You know, it's very calm at the beginning. We've got the water snake at the end, and all of the symbolism around those things. The fact that it's a chronological story, limited number of characters and locations, but it's obviously a very short text. That use of foreshadowing, you know, the students always enjoy the bit about Candy's dog, foreshadowing the death of Lennie at the end, how Curly's wife blocks out the light. And of course, it's written in 6 parts or chapters, begins where it ends, third person narrative, all of those kind of things. And there are that level of notes for all of these set texts. So moving on to paper 2, when we're thinking about modern drama, students demonstrate their knowledge and understanding of their drama text, including the ways in which writers use language, form, and structure to create effect. So we're looking at a close understanding of their drama text, a critical style, an informed personal engagement, how writers create literary effects, the appropriate use of literary terminology, and identify and use relevant examples from the play. So we've got 2 assessment objectives, and we will be talking more about assessment objectives. Here we've got AO1 and AO2. AO1 is demonstrate a close knowledge and understanding of text, maintaining a critical style and presenting an informed personal engagement. And then we've got our AO2, analyze the language, form, and structure used by the writer to create meanings and effects. So section A is modern drama. They study one text from the prescribed list for this section of the paper, and they answer one question on their chosen text, and teaching should focus on the whole text. And then section B, the literary heritage, they one text from the prescribed list for this section of the paper, and they answer one question on their chosen text. And again, teaching should be on the whole text. It's open book, so they take in a clean and unannotated copy of their text into the exam. So, paper 3, the coursework is the alternative to paper 2. 40% of the total English literature qualification. They respond to those teacher-devised, student-devised, teacher-student devised tasks. They write 2 pieces of coursework, obviously one on each section, the modern drama or the literary heritage. They're required, it's internally set and assessed and externally moderated. The set texts for the assignments are the same as for paper 2, sections A and B. Teaching should be on whole text, encourage reading skills and produce clear and coherent writing. There is no prescribed word length. Moderators will not stop reading after a certain number of words, but obviously sometimes if students go way over, they might become narrative or descriptive. So what are the texts? For papers 2 and 3, the modern drama text, the choice is from A View from the Bridge, An Inspector Calls, A Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime, Kindertransport, Death and the King's Horseman. And for literary heritage, we've got Romeo and Juliet, Macbeth, The Merchant of Venice, Pride and Prejudice, Great Expectations, and The Scarlet Letter. So I'm just going to pause for a moment. I can see there might be 1 or 2 problems with the link there. So while we're sorting out the resources, would you mind just typing into the chat box which of the texts you're choosing for modern drama and which one for literary heritage? And I'm just going to mute for a moment, and I'll pop that into the text chat. Oh, Macbeth and the Merchant of Venice are both from the same section there, May. So you need one from the modern drama as well. I think some of you might be popping your answers into the Q&A, which I can't see while I've got the PowerPoint running. If you could just pop your answers into the general chat, that would be great. Now, looking at those, it looks to me as if the most popular texts are An Inspector Calls and Macbeth, quite closely followed by Romeo and Juliet. So again, let's look at the Getting Started guide to see the support that's available. Let's have a look at page 17 and 18, which is on An Inspector Calls. We have a look at that. We've got 7 bullet points for context and content. Obviously, you're all English teachers, so you'll know most of this, but written in 1945, shortly after the end of World War II, but it's set, of course, in 1912, just before World War I. And there are a lot, we know all the reasons for that. It allows us to see Mr. Burling as a bit of a buffoon, doesn't it? So Burling's views that the wars would never happen, that the Titanic, absolutely unthinkable, of course. They'll provide dramatic irony, as the audience are aware right from the start, because they're a post-1945 audience, about the fact that those things did happen. Priestley was a radio broadcaster during World War II, so his awareness of these things and his desire for people to think in a different way socially is all influenced by that. The rigidity of class distinctions, that had been reduced. In 1912, the classes were very distinctly separated into working, middle, and upper class. Then we've got women, rights of women in 1912, and the fact that there was no support for single pregnant women with age to,
I can hear it from here. Come here, can I fix it?
Thank you. So when Daisy Renton goes to Mrs. Burling, she's at the whim of whichever way the wind is blowing from Mrs. Burling, if you like. And then working class women like Eva Smith had no choice but to work for low wages, and there was no legal protection for them. Then under themes, we've got 4 bullet points. We've got class, the fact that Priestley's writing from a socialist perspective, and he uses, we're talking about the writer at work here, he uses Eva Smith to convey his views. And the whole thing about Mrs. Burling, of course, correcting her husband about how to behave in front of the maid and all those kind of things. Then the second bullet point is responsibility. The inspector's trying to get everybody to be responsible, to take their share of the responsibility. Even when Sheila, of course, says, "So I'm really responsible," the inspector's there not to tell her that, but to tell her that everybody had a part to play. Then we've got the relationships between parents and children. The way Mr. and Mrs. Burling have brought up Sheila and Eric, Sheila being spoilt, Eric being feckless and directionless, addicted to alcohol. When Eric says, "You're not the kind of father a boy could go to." And then we've got the supernatural. The inspector's identity is never revealed. He possesses omniscient knowledge of Eva Smith. All of those things. And then we've got a couple of paragraphs there on form and structure, the fact that the play is in 3 acts, and a little bit of the background on that, the murder mystery. And then the thing about the inspector and the interviews and how that builds to the tension, with Eric at the end. So there's quite a lot of nice material there for you. And then on the literary heritage, if we have a quick look at the Macbeth, this is on page 24 and 25 of that Getting Started guide. You can see here we've got 8 bullet points on context and content. The fact that it's the shortest tragedy when it was written, about James I, and the fact that Macbeth was written to please him. Obviously, the divine right of kings, students always enjoy that sort of an idea. The lineage of James, the whole thing about witchcraft and James I, and the fact that he believed that his ship had been sent off course by witches, and the whole original story by Holinshed. Sorry, turning my pages here. And then if we look at themes, we've got 8 themes explored here for us. We've got ambition. Obviously, it has a bit of a driver, isn't it? Drives Macbeth and Lady Macbeth. Have no spur to prick the sides of my intent, but only vaulting ambition. And the whole thing about Lady Macbeth saying, art not without ambition, but without the illness should attend it. I'm sure we can all do those kind of quotes as we're thinking about these themes. The supernatural, the air-drawn dagger that led him to Banquo. When Banquo's ghost, the air-drawn dagger that led him to Duncan. We've got Banquo's ghost, now shake thy gory locks at me. Then we've got violence and how that is revealed during the play, even at the beginning when Macbeth unseams him from the knave to the chaps. Then we've got the death of Banquo, the killing of the Macduff household. Then we've got the English forces and so on. Power, that desire for the crown, to be in power. Fate and free will, who's responsible. The reversal of nature, and all the time we've got these things, foul is fair and fair is foul. Look like the innocent flower, but be the serpent under it. There's no art to find the mind's construction in the faith, all of those kind of things. We've got light and dark, the darkness obviously symbolizing Macbeth's tyranny. We can think of lots of things about light and dark, back all the way through to Act 5, scene 1, really, when Lady Macbeth demands that a candle is near her at all times. And death, of course, is a recurrent theme throughout the play. And in terms of form and structure, we've got a couple of paragraphs for you there. 5 acts subdivided into scenes, and very, very short scenes, haven't we, in Act 5, when it's all kind of coming together. We've got the blank verse and some prose, and the type of meter, a little paragraph about that as well. Okay, so just going to have a moment now into the group discussion. Are you thinking about paper 2 or paper 3? Any questions you've got about that you want to ask people who have been teaching for a while? And if you've got any advice. So I'm just going to mute for a little bit. I'm going to put that in the text chat, a couple of questions, and you can have a go at answering them. Thank you. Sidra, an answer to your question, we're talking about the coursework, paper 3. I'm just going to pick up a couple of these questions here. So those of you joining from Moorland School, the Pearson website cannot find past papers from the last 2 years. You will see that they're under a padlock. Your school will have a login. If you see your exams officer, your school will have a login. They're under a padlock so that students can't access them because schools use them as their mock exam quite often. So that's why they're padlocked. But teachers can log in and can take those padlocks off and access those materials. So if you don't have a personal login, see your exams officer, and they should give you a login or should be able to get you a login, and you'll be able to use those most recent papers. I'm just scrolling for a moment to make sure I've picked up the questions. Okay, I think we have. So we're going to move on now to thinking about teaching the content. Again, this is an opportunity here in the chat to discuss and share good practice of how you would teach these assessment objectives. So the assessment objectives, we call them AOs for short, are here. There are 4 of them, and you will see in the right-hand column the weighting of those assessment objectives in the qualification as a whole. So AO1 is about knowledge and understanding, the critical style, the informed personal engagement, and that's 30% of the final grade. AO2 is the analytical, the analysis of language, form and structure. So it's the analytical assessment objective, and it's 40% of the final grade. AO3 is the links and connections. We're going to look at where these are assessed in a moment, and it will hopefully all fall into place nicely. But that comparative assessment objective is 10% of the final grade. And then the context assessment objective is AO4, the relationships between text and the context in which they are written. And that's 20% of the final grade. So where are these assessed? So AO2 is in the unseen poetry. Remembering this is a modern poem, students haven't seen it before, so they have to, the only thing that they can employ here are their analytical skills, AO2, the analysis of language, form and structure, to that unseen poem, and there are 20 marks available for that question, section A on paper 1. Then we have the anthology text. Paper 1, section B, this is the 30-mark question. Students have studied all of these poems before. So they're looking at AO2, the analysis of language, form and structure. And this is the only place on these 2 papers where AO3 comparison is assessed, links and connections. And then the modern prose text, which they've studied in class, it's their knowledge and understanding of the text and the context for that modern prose text that they have already studied. And then paper 2 or 3, so exam or coursework for the modern drama, we're looking at AO1 and AO2, so knowledge and understanding of the text and the analysis of language, form and structure in the modern drama. And then in the literary heritage text, those same 2 assessment objectives, but also the AO4, the relationship between text and the context in which they are written. So now we're going to go on to have a little look at these assessment objectives in a bit more detail. Now, obviously, we've got, this is from page 43 of the Getting Started guide. These are approaches to teaching AO1, the knowledge and understanding of text, the maintenance of that critical style, the informed personal response. So, page 43 of Getting Started Guide. These are approaches to teaching it. So this is something that you can do with your students. So, get a piece of sugar paper, different colored markers, a range of statements about the text. It's a silent debate. So writing comments, adding to the views of others while the debate is taking place. Students are in groups of 4 or 5. So just have a little read through that. You can see how it could be used. They're moving around the tables, but it's all nice and silent, and they're adding these ideas. It's just a really nice little activity. Thanks for your question, Helen. I think you might be, are you referring there to the modern prose response? I'm thinking that you are. And obviously, the writer's, thank you. The writer's craft, students can use that to inform their AO1. Obviously, we're looking there at the knowledge and the understanding of the text, the critical style, so that they might, AO2 isn't assessed as an assessment objective, but it might be helping to inform the AO1. I hope that makes sense. Okay, so that's our little approach to teaching AO1 on the screen from the Getting Started Guide. And we've got some approaches now to the teaching of AO2. This particular slide that we're going to look at now, this one, is in relation to the modern drama, the AO2 on modern drama, because this one is looking at an inspector calls. So we're looking at how language form and structure are used to create meanings. This is from, it's called Exploding Language. And again, it's in the Getting Started Guide. It's pages 46 to 47. Just going to give you a moment to read through that, and then I'm going to direct you to something else. Okay, thanks for that question, Emma. Yep, it is quite it's just an example of where this student is going. It's not necessarily the full paragraph, but it's just showing how they've used those elements of that seed paragraph. And I actually can't answer that question about how many of them you'd expect to see in an exam, because it really depends on the content of them, doesn't it? But it will all become clear in module 2 of this, with the module 2 that I'm doing on the 2nd of May, when we start to look at real student examples at different levels. So if you're happy to park that question, we will be looking at what responses look like in that session. Okay, the other thing I would like to direct you to is in your pack, SO7, and that's a document. Thanks, Sidra. Yeah, the module 2 is really the nitty-gritty of assessment. You get to do a little bit of marking. We show you things at level 3, 4, 5 for the different questions. This first module is very much an introduction, and then we really get into the assessment side of it. This is all about content really today and support. Assessment is module 2. So yeah, writing about drama as drama, SO7 in your download pack. So this is, again, we're carrying on from the Getting Started Guide. a little bit about dramatic techniques, dramatic irony, dramatic tension, dramatic pauses and cliffhangers. And dramatic conflict. Thanks for that question, Sidra. Share where I can get help from comparative analysis of poetry as well, the sample of candidates. I mean, they will be available in the download in module 2. Obviously, we haven't put the sample, we're not using samples today, we're using them in the second one. So I think what we're saying here is that for paper 2, where we are talking, not all of you actually, I did see one Pride and Prejudice as we were scrolling up, but many of you are doing drama and drama, modern drama and literary heritage drama, not all of you. But obviously, if we're talking about drama, drama is meant to be performed. We would be thinking about how the writer creates drama in these texts. Might also be, you know, obviously in Pride and Prejudice, there's plenty of drama that's created by the writer. So in your download, there's also the scheme of work. Obviously, it doesn't have to be followed. The scheme of work is SO8 in your download pack. And this is just an example from it, but there are, you know, it's just an example of some of the materials that are there to help support you in the teaching of this. So that's just a screenshot of a little bit of it. It doesn't have to be followed, and these are editable for you. They're also available on the Pearson website under Teaching and Learning Resources for the 4ET English Literature. And they're just there to support you. Another document we have, which is a very helpful document. This is SO9 in the download docs for today's training. We call this a comparison mock list. So it's when students, perhaps it's great for revision, this poem 1, poem 2. So what are they looking at? Maybe they're looking at remembrance in a couple of these poems in the anthology. Making sure they know the meaning or the purpose, so they're not just feature spotting from the poems, that they know what the overview is, what was the poet trying to say. Then we've got some examples of language techniques. How are they used in poem 1? How are they used in poem 2? We've got something on imagery. How is that created? What's it suggesting? What are the allusions in the 2 poems? Then we've got the bit about structure, rhyme, rhythm, and so on. How are those used in the 2 poems? And then a little bit about tone. Of course, often it's level 4 or level 5 candidates who are in those levels-based mark scheme who are better at identifying and being able to write about tone. You know, how is that tone created? What is the voice of the poet? It's just a useful tool for you to download using the classroom. So that's it. We're talking here AO3, which of course is the anthology poetry, paper 1, section B. So this is an activity that you can use in the classroom, Poem Partners. It's, I keep referring you to this Getting Started guide. This is page 53 of the Getting Started guide. It engages students in an active and dynamic way with how 2 poems are similar or different. So each student takes 1 poem from their anthology as their home poem, the one that they're working on. They write the title of their poem on a piece of paper, hold it up, or you know, the mini whiteboards that many teachers use now. And then the teacher reads out a statement. Find a poem that you know, uses, explores, whatever it might be, whatever device you're focusing on, and then they find a partner in 2 minutes to match with. Might be odd poems left at the end, you know, see how that works out for you. and then the two students justify their matching. It's quite useful, you know, when you're starting off on these poems. Yeah, just a little activity for you, page 53 of the Getting Started guide. So moving on now to AO4, understanding the relationship between a text and its context. This is from the specification, this particular screenshot. It underlines what we mean by context. There are different types, different categories of context which affect writers' works and the reader's response to it. The writer's own life. So we might be thinking there, for example, of that of Mice and Men bit we talked about earlier, where Steinbeck was historically, geographically, his own work, those kind of things. Place and time of writing. The historical setting, time, location. The social and cultural context. So we might be thinking there, for example, of an inspector calls, attitudes in society, expectations, those kind of things. The literary context, the text, you know, literary movements or genres, and the way in which texts are received and engaged by different audiences. You know, so for example, if we're talking about Macbeth, we might be talking about at the time how outrageous that Lady Macbeth, as a woman, would be so dominant, whereas now in the 21st century, that wouldn't be so outrageous for us. Of course, I've used an example of literary context there on an inspector calls. Of course, context is not assessed in that assignment A or section A, but I just used it generally while talking about context. So this is a little bit of on top tips for AO4. So relate all context points to the text. You know, students have to remember this is, of course, a literary essay. So it's not a history essay. And it's not a bolt-on, unrelated paragraph somewhere in the essay. We don't need to know where Shakespeare was born unless it's absolutely relevant to the point being made in terms of the analysis. Some examples should be supported by contextual comments. So just a few tips there on that. Now we've looked at this one already, so we're not going to kind of labour this particular point, but I talked about these when we were looking at the Getting Started guide earlier. But there are a couple of activities in the Getting Started guide to help you here. We're looking at the Getting Started guide, pages 56 and 57. Thinking about the integration of the content and the context. So you can see here, we've got two activities that you can use. So quotations and references from the text, folding a piece of paper in half and half again, 8 squares, divide the class in half and ask half the class to write a context detail in each of the 8 boxes. And we've got an example there from the Scarlet Letter, which isn't a text. I don't think any of you popped that into the meeting chat when I was asking what text. And then we've got an out of context activity. Again, there both of these are actually from the Scarlet Letter, but you know, you can adapt them, of course, to the text that you're studying. Okay, so that we've been through what the question paper content is. We're not looking at questions until module 2. We've been through the assessment objectives. We've looked at what's assessed where. So thinking now a little bit about the planning of the course. So lesson plans. There are some of these in the on the website, and one of them is SO10 in your pack. SO10 in the download for today. This is from poetry. This one is on the website. I'll just give you a few minutes. I'll put myself on mute, give you a little bit of time to have a look through that, because we've got time that we can use in today's training session just to have a little look. So SO10 in your pack, and I'll mute for a couple of minutes. Yeah, thanks for that question, Danielle. So I'm just going to scroll back up through the chat there. Where else do people source resources? So any good practice that you'd like to share in the text chat, that professional resources that you found? I suppose we're all thinking of things like Teach It and Times Educational Supplements. There are lots around, but people, English Biz, anything else people would like to share? Thanks for that question, Emma. There isn't a specific book for the poetry, but there is a textbook which I'll be talking about in a moment under support. So a little bit about course planning. The IGCSE has 120 guided learning hours. There's a 2-year plan that can be adapted to suit centres in their particular context. The scheme of work includes some suggested teaching approaches, and the following is a course planner based on a 45-minute lesson duration. I'll just give you a moment to have a little look at that. This suggests that in year 1, students, I mean, this is not prescriptive, it's a suggestion, it's whatever works for you. But it's suggested here that in year 1, students study modern drama, literary heritage, and the poetry anthology. And in year 2, the students continue to study the poetry anthology, including some practice on theme poetry, and their modern prose text. In the pack, there is a full course plan, which you can or don't have to use, of course, and it can be adapted to suit your needs, your purposes. So that's available. Thank you so much for sharing good practice. That's always one of the real bonuses of this, where teachers are able to help each other, as we go through. Thank you. Yeah, so while we're thinking about past papers and mark schemes, just want to talk a little bit about the fact that there are 2 papers, and if you're new to us, you might not know about this. So obviously we have 2 sittings for the IGCSE. We have the June sitting, and now we have the November sitting. It used to be a January sitting, but now it's November. We did ask schools which they would prefer, and preference was for November. So now we have a June series and a November series. Now, if you look on the website, you will see that there's a paper that says R on it. So there are 2 papers. So for example, if you go into June 2023, you will see that there is 4ET 101 and there is 4ET 101R. Now, some of you, so for example, if you're teaching in Sri Lanka or Bangkok, I'm just trying to think where we've got people from in today's meeting, you will be taking the R paper. Now, R only stands for regional, because obviously we can't have students in the UK and students in Bangkok taking exams at the same time, because somebody somewhere is going to have to sit an exam at a horrible time. So the questions are different. They are at the same level and they're awarded at the same time. So the grades, what you need to do to get a grade or get into a particular band in the levels-based mark scheme are the same. It's just the questions that are different, because obviously with technology, we can't have a leak of what questions are going to be. So the questions on the main paper and the R paper are different. So what it means for you as teachers is that you actually have twice the number of past papers and resources to look at. So in relation to that question about the poetry anthology, obviously there is a focus to that question, but, oh, in Sri Lanka you don't take the R. That's interesting. I had always thought you did. Oh, thank you for that. I didn't know that. I thought it was from a 4-hour time zone across, but obviously you're 5.5 hours in Sri Lanka. So no, that's really interesting. Thank you. So a really useful thing to do is to go into the mark schemes and annotate your own anthology from the mark scheme, because then you've got lots and lots of things that you can talk about. Now, obviously, the students do need to answer in relation to the question asked, but that's a helpful way forward. Okay, so this is the sample course planner for you to have a look at. So we can see this one is, this example is modern drama. And those are all available for you to look at. Okay, yeah, thanks very much for that. Yep, I hadn't realised you did the main paper, not the art paper. That's yeah, just very interesting. I didn't know that. There you go. Every day's a school day, isn't it? Or as the Pearson motto says, always learning. Okay, so we've got a little bit here about the scheme of work. We've got a little bit about the getting started guide. The scheme of work is a Word document rather than a PDF, so you can edit it for your school and the timing of your lessons and so on. And that's a little bit about how it's set out, the columns, an overview of the times for the lessons, the sections of the paper, and the learning outcomes, and so on. Now that is SO8 in your download, but it's also available on the website. So putting it all together, got lots of ideas there. Lots of people have shared some nice good practice in the chat. Obviously, you need to make sure that you're leaving time to cover all of the course. And if you're doing the English language, that as well. You need to think about how much teaching time you have, which of the papers you're doing, whether you're going to do the exam route or the coursework route, which we've talked about a lot today. How much time to allow for revision, and when to build in mocks and tests. So got a few minutes now just to have a little look at the getting started guide, the lesson plan, the scheme of work, and to share any good practice. So any suggestions from those of you already teaching this about where you would start for those people who are new. So again, I'm just going to mute for 3 minutes while you share some good practice. I'll pop it in the chat. Okay, thank you. I'm just going to give you a second to read through, scroll back up through some of that chat, because there are some really useful suggestions there. So moving on to the last little bit of today's training. So a little bit here now about support. So where do you find resources? Well, this is the landing page of the 4ET part of the Pearson website. And you can see down the left-hand side here, the categories of the specification and the sample assessments, the exam materials, which is where you'll find all the question papers, the mark schemes, and the examiner reports. The forms and administration. So those are, for example, the forms you need for the coursework, the send off for moderation and so on. And then the teaching and learning materials, where you can see that at the time this slide was made, there were 80. I haven't checked in the last few days to see if any more have been added, but we do add to it all of the time. There are also some exemplars, where you'll be able to see scripts at different marks. You can see that little bit of the tab has been screenshot into here for you. And there's the hyperlink there as well. So this is a screenshot of the student book. You don't have to use it. It prepares students for the English Literature 4ET qualification. It includes access to the ebook. It provides comprehensive coverage of the specification. It's designed to supply students with the best possible preparation for the exam. The chapters in this book are mapped closely to the specification. Learning is embedded with differentiated exercises and exam practice. It signposts the transferable skills. There's a glossary of key English terminology there. There's an online teacher's resource pack that is available for planning, teaching, and assessment support. But obviously, you don't have to have the textbook. There are lots of other resources available as well. And we've shared a lot of those in the good practice today. In terms of questions after today, we do have Claire Haviland. Many of you will know her if you've been teaching any of our English qualifications. Claire is the oracle of all things English. So if you're doing one of our international GCSE English language papers, either specification A or specification B, you go to Claire. If you're doing the home GCSE, you go to Claire. Doing the international A level, the IAL in either English language or English literature, Claire is your person. If you're doing any of the home English A levels, Claire is your person. And for this IGCSE 4ET English literature, Claire is your person. So any questions after today's training, then please go to Claire. You've got her phone number here, her email, her Twitter account. She always tweets what she's reading. That's always very interesting. You can sign up for her subject advisor updates, which is a really useful way of finding out information. So, for example, the new texts that have come onto the 4ET for the modern prose, you would have heard about those first on Claire's subject update. And you can also book an appointment with her, and that might be very useful if you're brand new to us. Okay, any questions? So today's training is quite short. The next training, where we use it doing a lot on assessments, is longer. But from me now, I'm just going to say thank you very much for everything you've brought to today's training. As I said, this is very much today about the content, the assessment objectives, and the support, whereas the next one is much more about assessments, module 2. Okay, thanks for your question, Emma. My understanding is at the moment recordings are not being shared, but that might be something to ask Claire as a subject advisor. Question there about becoming an examiner. So if you Google Pearson examiner opportunities or examiner jobs, you'll see that they're all advertised there, and it takes you to a hyperlink in an application form. Hopefully that's answered that. Any other questions? Okay, if I can just ask, Aisha, do you want me to close the event or do you want to do it?
I can do it, that's fine.
Okay, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.